On January 27, 2026, world number 3 Coco Gauff retreated behind a wall inside Rod Laver Arena after a devastating 6-1, 6-2 quarterfinal loss to Alina Svitolina, found what she believed was a private space away from cameras, and smashed her racket into the concrete floor. She was wrong about the privacy. An ESPN backstage camera captured every second of her raw, vulnerable meltdown and broadcast it to millions of viewers worldwide. What happened next exposed a surveillance system at the 2026 Australian Open so invasive that the world number 2 compared it to a zoo, and the organization supposedly protecting these women, their own statement contradicts the broadcast deals they profit from. The official Australian Open highlights package cut together Gauff's loss in under 2 minutes. What they did not cut was the backstage footage of her breaking down. We have tracked the full timeline from match point to viral moment, cross-referenced player statements from 5 separate press conferences, and obtained the WTA's official response alongside Tennis Australia's defense. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications to join our investigation before this footage gets claimed or the narrative shifts. To understand why January 27th matters, you need to understand who Coco Gauff was walking into this match. The 21-year-old American, ranked world number 3, 2-time Grand Slam champion, was the betting favorite to win her first Australian Open title. She had been flawless through 4 rounds in Melbourne, building a campaign that had commentators calling her the player to beat. Her opponent, Alina Svitolina, ranked 12th in the world, was a respected veteran but had never reached an Australian Open semifinal. Their head-to-head stood at 2-1 in Gauff's favor. On paper, this was Gauff's match to lose. The 2026 Australian Open featured a record prize pool of $111.5 million Australian dollars, up nearly 16% from 2025, the biggest increase in the tournament's history. Reaching the semifinal would have earned Gauff 780 WTA ranking points and 1.25 million Australian dollars. Instead, her quarterfinal exit netted 430 points and 750,000 Australian dollars. More critically, it was the second consecutive year her Australian Open ended in the quarterfinals, matching her 2025 exit to Paula Badosa. Amanda Anisimova jumped ahead of her in the live rankings, pushing Gauff down to world number 4. Now here's what happened inside Rod Laver Arena on that Tuesday evening. The match lasted exactly 59 minutes. Svitolina was flawless from the opening game, and Gauff could find no answers. The American committed 26 unforced errors, including 5 double faults in the opening set alone. Her backhand misfired, her forehand misfired, her return sailed wide. Svitolina won the first set 6-1 and the second set 6-2, booking her first Australian Open semifinal against top-seeded Aryna Sabalenka. Gauff offered her congratulations at the net with grace. Then she turned and walked toward the locker room. What she did next, she intended to be private. Gauff moved into a corridor connecting Rod Laver Arena to the stadium complex, specifically behind a wall near the match call area. She chose this location deliberately. As she later told reporters, quote, "I try to find a spot away from the cameras. I am not a fan of breaking rackets," end quote. She had promised herself she would never break a racket on court because it did not reflect well on her in front of young fans. So she went backstage to release the frustration rather than, in her own words, lashing out at her team. But the Australian Open's omnipresent backstage camera system was watching. A high-definition camera positioned in the player corridor captured Gauff repeatedly smashing her racket against the concrete floor. The footage was immediately transmitted to rights-holding broadcasters. ESPN aired it, social media accounts clipped it. Within minutes, the video was viral. Millions of people watched a 21-year-old woman in her most vulnerable moment of frustration broadcast without her knowledge or consent. When Gauff arrived at her post-match press conference, she discovered what had happened. Her reaction was immediate. Quote, "I tried to go somewhere where they would not broadcast, but obviously they did. Maybe some conversations can be had, because I believe the only private space we have at this tournament is the locker room," end quote. Then she referenced a nearly identical incident involving Aryna Sabalenka after the 2023 US Open final, where Sabalenka was filmed smashing her racket in a training area after losing to Gauff. That footage was also broadcast globally. Judy Murray called it out at the time, saying, quote, "This footage should never have been made public," end quote. And this is where the investigation reveals the pattern. This is not an isolated incident. This is a system. The Australian Open introduced behind-the-scenes cameras in 2019, allowing rights holders access to footage from player corridors, warm-up areas, the gym, and walkways. What started as a few fixed cameras has expanded into a sprawling surveillance network. According to Gravity Media, the tournament's broadcast partner, the 2026 Australian Open deployed 172 camera sources across Melbourne Park, including robotic camera systems and 22 roving radio frequency cameras. Over 150 broadcast cameras fed into 10 production galleries that delivered more than 200 hours of coverage to international rights holders, including 9 Network, ESPN, Eurosport, CCTV, and Wow Wow. The financial infrastructure driving this surveillance is massive. 9 Network holds exclusive domestic rights through 2029 in a deal worth 425 million Australian dollars. The total broadcast ecosystem generates hundreds of millions in revenue for Tennis Australia. Craig Tiley, the CEO of Tennis Australia and tournament director, has a direct financial incentive to maximize content captured by these cameras. Within 48 hours of Gauff's incident, 4 of the biggest names in tennis publicly condemned the system. World number 2 Iga Swiatek, speaking after her own quarterfinal loss to Elena Rybakina, delivered the most devastating critique. Quote, "The question is, are we tennis players or are we animals in the zoo where they are observed even when they're pooping? That was exaggerating, obviously, but it would be nice to have some privacy," end quote. Swiatek pointed out that at other Grand Slams like Wimbledon and the French Open, players can access restricted areas without cameras. At the Australian Open, players are under constant watch regardless of context. Swiatek herself had become a viral moment earlier in the tournament when backstage cameras caught her being denied entry to the player gym after forgetting her accreditation. She acknowledged the humor, but stressed the principle. Quote, "We are meant to be watched on court and in the press. That is our job. It is not our job to be a meme when you forget your accreditation," end quote. When asked if she had raised the issue with tournament officials, Swiatek gave a blunt reply. Quote, "What is the point?" End quote. Jessica Pegula, the 6th seed who had just reached her first Australian Open semifinal, called it an invasion of privacy. Quote, "Honestly, we've been talking about this problem for years. I remember Madison Keys saying that her #1 priority on the Players Council was exactly to stop all these cameras. It has gotten completely out of hand," end quote. Pegula described being filmed in the gym, in hallways, in areas where she did not know cameras existed. Quote, "The only times you are not being recorded are when you are showering or using the bathroom. I genuinely believe it is a significant invasion of privacy," end quote. She also exposed a stunning hypocrisy. The tournament had asked her to remove social media posts because they own the footage rights, while simultaneously filming her without consent in every corridor. Amanda Anisimova explained how she adapted to survive the surveillance. Quote, "The fact that they posted Coco's video is tough because she didn't have a say in that. I knew I didn't have much privacy, so I just went to the locker room," end quote. The fact that a professional athlete's coping strategy for a Grand Slam is to avoid being filmed in her own workspace tells you everything. Even Novak Djokovic weighed in. Quote, "It's really sad that you can't basically move away anywhere and hide and fume out your frustration in a way that will not be captured by a camera," end quote. Then he delivered a line that should haunt every tournament organizer. Quote, "I'm surprised that we have no cameras while we are taking a shower. That's probably the next step," end quote. He acknowledged the commercial demand, but insisted there should always be a borderline. And then he admitted what no governing body will say. Quote, "I find it hard to see the trend changing in the opposite direction. It's only going to be as it is or even more cameras," end quote. Now here is where the institutional response exposes the real scandal. Craig Tiley appeared on Tennis Channel and said, quote, "We have heard you and whatever adjustments we need to make, we will make. It's a fine line between player promotion, event promotion, and where the cameras are," end quote. But notice what Tiley actually defended. He listed private areas without cameras, locker rooms, coaches' rooms, training rooms, and recovery rooms. What he did not address is why every corridor, walkway, gym, and warm-up space is fair game for broadcast. He framed the cameras as tools to bring the fan and the player closer, to help lift player value. Translation, the backstage footage is commercially valuable, and Tennis Australia is not giving it up. The WTA's response is where the contradiction becomes inescapable. WTA Chair Valerie Camillo called the players' concerns completely valid and a very human and fair request. The WTA stated it had already reduced camera presence at its own tournaments. Then came the key line, quote, "We moved to this standard because we agree that there should be clear and respectful boundaries in off-court areas," end quote. The WTA called for tournament organizers and broadcast partners to ensure appropriate boundaries. That sounds supportive. Until you realize the WTA profits from the very broadcast deals that fund these cameras. The same networks that aired Gauff's private meltdown are the WTA's commercial partners. When the WTA says there should be clear and respectful boundaries, they are simultaneously demanding those boundaries and profiting when they are violated. They issued no mandate, no rule change, no enforcement mechanism. It was a statement designed to appear protective while changing absolutely nothing. So let us be clear about what happened. A 21-year-old, two-time Grand Slam champion lost a match, tried to process her emotions privately, and was broadcast to millions without her knowledge. The world number 2 said players are treated like zoo animals. A top 10 player called it an invasion of privacy and revealed the tournament polices her social media while surveilling her in every hallway. A former Players Council member made eliminating these cameras her top priority, and nothing changed. Tennis Australia defended the cameras as commercially beneficial. The WTA issued a statement demanding boundaries it has no intention of enforcing, and 172 cameras kept rolling. This is not about one racket smash. This is about a governance structure where the people who are supposed to protect players are the same people who profit from exposing them. When the WTA says clear and respectful boundaries and then collects revenue from the broadcasts that violate those boundaries, that is not advocacy. That is complicity. When Craig Tiley says, "We have heard you," while defending a system with 172 cameras and a $425 million broadcast deal, listening is not the same as acting. Will this change before the French Open? At Wimbledon? Based on the WTA's non-response and Tennis Australia's financial incentives, the answer is no. Because in professional tennis, player welfare is a talking point. Broadcast revenue is a bottom line. And until someone forces a choice between the two, the cameras will keep rolling. And we will keep covering every moment they try to hide, because someone has to. If this is your first time seeing our investigations, check out the Tennis Playbook playlist for more breakdowns of what the WTA does not want you to see. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and let us know in the comments. Should players have the right to a private meltdown, or is this the price of being a professional athlete in 2026?